You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 90. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. I feel very fortunate to have this platform where I get to share myself with all of you, and that I'm lucky enough to have guests who come on and offer their knowledge and experience as well. I also know what an incredibly big deal and a gift it is for someone to come on this show and be completely vulnerable and candid in who they are and what they've experienced. I got the opportunity to sit down with Courdae, who is a DEI consultant. Her story is unique because she started off in the hair and beauty industry, only to realize that she was already taking on the job she was meant to do. Erica is also the mother of 2 biracial children, and I was absolutely humbled when she shared some very personal stories of what her children have experienced already in their young lives. As adults, we often deal with things we shouldn't have to, but when it comes to children, I feel very strongly that they should be protected. Erica is a calming force and explains how she first and foremost holds a safe space for her children and then uses the negative instances to be teaching moments, not only for them, but for those who need it most. I loved Erica's openness, her explanations, and most importantly, the way she's raising her children. Hi, Erica.
Hey there. How are you, Michelle?
I am so good. How are you?
I am good. I am glad to be here. I like talking. So opportunities
That's a good thing.
to have public conversations. I'm like, yes, please, and thank you.
Same here. I'm like, oh, and I get to talk to people for fun. Like,
right.
This is, being a podcaster is one of the best gigs ever.
I know. I'll take it.
It's the most wonderful excuse to reach out to random people or people that you admire, and you're like, hey, can I talk to you? I want you to be on my show. But
right.
Secretly, I'm like, I just want to talk to them.
I'm with you.
Can you take a moment and introduce yourself, please?
I can. Hello, everyone out there listening. My name is Courdae. I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion coach and consultant. However, the coach part comes first, and I believe in coaching the whole human because I don't think that diversity, equity, and inclusion are something ancillary that you add on to your life or your brand or your business. It is the lens through which you do all things. So I like to support small businesses, entrepreneurs, and sometimes a little bit larger than that, businesses, brands, and entities in how to begin to learn a little bit more of what they didn't know, how they want to do things differently, and how to make the type of impact on the world that would change the legacy that you leave behind.
That was beautifully put.
Thank you.
I love that. I love that we're in a time and space right now in our world that this is becoming more prevalent. We see more DEI strategists, coaches, consultants, and more focus on it because this has been a part that's lacking for way too long.
Correct. And the reality is that it can be really easy to look back at all of the places that we didn't have it and for how long it went unchecked and what is now kind of run amok because of that. And I like to really focus on, okay, this is where we are today. What can we do to impact right now and going forward? Because we can't undo, but we can change what we do here going forward.
Absolutely. And I think the wonderful thing is that we are seeing people who want to make that change. But then at the same time, it's really scary to see all those who are completely backwards, like beyond not wanting to change.
Yep.
And I don't know what it will take to reach some of those individuals, especially since we live in a country where, it's the land of the free and the opportunity and everybody's supposed to be equal. And yet we have such small-minded people out there.
Well, the unfortunate truth is that there are some people that uh, they're stuck in their ways. And I try to really be someone that brings my personal optimism into what I do professionally. However, yeah, there are some people I'm just not going to waste my energy and my efforts on. And that sounds bad, but it's because, there is no convincing if this is not something that you have an interest in. It's more to me about, how to get beyond the fear and how to really remind people that the rhetoric that they were given around the things that we want to change, whether we're looking at hiring practices, whether we're looking at financial equity, whether we are looking at educational equity. And there's this fear of, oh, it's pie. So if I give you more, what do I lose? And being able to really remind people and to even show them that this is not as finite of a resource as you are told that it is. And so therefore, if you remember this and therefore release some of those resources to those that don't have it or are at a severe deficit with it, it actually benefits everyone. And then it's like, oh, well, I actually benefit from that too. So cool, here you go. But it's getting to that point because so often people just think, oh, I'm doing this for someone else. It's like, no, you're doing this for you too.
It reminds me of when you come into really the online space and everyone's a coach. And yet it doesn't stop others from becoming a coach, even though everyone's already doing it, by having other people brought into, and as you said, giving them a piece of the pie. It doesn't make any difference, to you personally.
No. And
in that way.
Right. See, and one of the big things that I think kind of gets lost, and this is, we have conversations like this in Pause on the Play the community because people are, especially in the online space, they run up against people that are very much like, well, if I do this, what does that mean for me? And it's like, it doesn't have to necessarily mean anything for you, especially in the realm of it having to mean something detrimental. Because using the example that you gave with coaches, I have worked with a number of coaches, and it didn't necessarily stop me from wanting to be in the space and to support people individually as well as, in group spaces, because nobody coaches like I coach. Nobody comes with my learned experience and my lens, because coaching is a modality. And the modality is nothing without the lens through which you coach and use it through. So that is just scarcity. And that is just, am I good enough to do this? Well, what happens when you're better than me? Well, step your game up, because it's not about better. It's just different.
Right. Oh, I love it. How did you get to become a coach? How did you get to become a DEI consultant strategist? What led you on this journey?
Honestly, I recognized that I'd been doing this for years. I've been in the beauty space, hair and makeup, for well over 20 years of my total experience. I mean, even though I'm only like 13, but there's that.
Let's make you 21. There's more fun at 21.
We'll go with that. And so I saw a lot of things. And one of the big things that I think a lot of people don't understand is that when you're in any industry, your learned experience is a huge part of the value that you bring. And I learned what it looked like to live in a specific body and for that body to dictate what you did and did not have access to. Were you trusted as an authority? Were you trusted to be professional? Did something about your hair or your skin tone or your presentation in any way, shape, or form now shift that? And you didn't have an opportunity to actually validate what was true. And so I saw these things play out when, I had a client who worked for a government agency because I'm near DC. And, that conversation for a Black woman of, do I continue getting a relaxer? Do I go and let my hair be natural? And the mental fight of, I don't want to be undermined. I don't want to be assumed to be less competent than what I was when my hair was straight. And so that set the tone for the conversations that I had and how I supported people in that concept of who you are should not ever inherently impact your access to something. Your skin tone, your hair texture, your sexual orientation, your gender, who you look, live, or love like should not impact these things. And so it started there. Really having marriage equality be a large part of the wedding components of my beauty business that I supported, and knowing that there was nobody that should feel as though they couldn't have access to that same type of joy on their wedding day simply because they love someone that someone else said they shouldn't love. These things set the tone for me to eventually get past my own fear of being a coach and saying, I absolutely can. And I, took all of these courses, and it took me deep, and it, really does take you through your own journey as a human as well. And I went through, I'm ICF certified, and I had no idea how much of what I did, again, really was setting the stage for diversity, equity, and inclusion to show up, not only because it had been a part of my business, but also as a Black woman with children that are, you can call them mixed or biracial. They self-identify as Black, but dad is white. And it showed up in every facet of my life. And there was almost like this wake-up call of like, this is what you do, and like everywhere. And I was like, oh, guess I should actually do this now.
I should listen to that.
Right. And so a few years ago, I really intentionally stepped into it, and I continue to learn because I don't think it's an end goal kind of thing. It's a journey. It's ongoing. But I mean, this is life. This is something that I'm invested in all facets of how I exist, because I want to leave the world better than I found it.
Absolutely. I don't know if I want to say amen or keep preaching or just keep going. I think it's beautiful. You're an incredible person and human being for doing this, because it honestly absolutely disgusts me to read in the media, to see on the news that, oh, this baker wouldn't bake a cake, a wedding cake, because it was a gay couple. Who are you? You're definitely not God. I'll tell you that right now. Yeah, you're a business owner. I get it. You don't have to serve whatever clients, to each his own, but it's just disgusting.
Right.
I think it's gross. And it goes back so far. This week, I was watching on the OWN network, the Black Wall Street documentary.
Yep.
And, once again, we're not being taught this in schools. This was really, my husband knew about it. He's much more of a history buff than I am. And I just said, but there were things that stunned him. And I'm like, who is it that any human being is to say, oh, well, because of your skin color, you can't own property. You can't be the guardian of your child because we've struck oil on your property, and therefore you couldn't handle that.
Right.
I'm not sure where this mentality of more than, lesser than comes about. And I love that you're doing this work to help those who are in that position that they're feeling less than because they shouldn't.
Right. And sometimes it is having someone that they do feel as though they're more than enough, but it's being able to have the safety, security, and freedom to move through the world in that way, because there are so many people that cannot believe that they have the audacity to think that they could move in the same ways as a white person. Oh, how dare you? And so it's often trying to remind people that you have to shift your own processing of what someone else has the rights to do and what they don't have the freedom to do. Because so often it's like, well, I want to do this, but I might literally risk my life by doing this. And, when we talk about marriage equality, one of the reasons why it was so important to me is because, again, dad of my kids is white. And for me, it very much mirrored the Loving case, which June 12th is Loving Day. And, if you don't know the case of the Lovings, I highly suggest that you go back and learn about it. But it was an interracial couple that was able to win the landmark case to make interracial marriage legal here. And it was just, because when I was serving same-sex couples, in the beauty industry with, weddings and things with silver immersion, that to me was just another mirror of somebody saying, you can't do this because I don't want to do it. Well, great. You don't do it, but don't tell me that I can't. And so it felt irresponsible to not respond to that in that way. And to have children that are going to walk through this world feeling like not enough and more than enough, depending on where they are and how other people process them. This is where, for me, it's so important to give them that sense of self, but also, again, reminding other people to really be aware of, are you putting your stuff on other people? And are you allowing them to have that same level of, safety and security to walk through life as you want to, that you take for granted and they don't?
Absolutely. Let's talk about your children, if you don't mind.
I can talk about my amazing kids.
I have not talked on the show to a parent of biracial children. And especially in the last year, this is a big topic. My son he's graduating kindergarten today. Aww. And so we have very open conversations. Sometimes they're probably almost too adult, but he knows what's happened to George Floyd. He knows Black people, white people, brown people. He understands skin color, and he also understands that we are all equal and we're all human beings, and that's first and foremost. Right. And I love that he's fully embracing it, and I believe it's because that's what we're teaching him, versus anything else. Right. And he was, when he saw the incident with George Floyd being murdered, he is a police officer lover. And he said, what did that man do? And I've told this story before, so I apologize to the listeners for repeating myself. But he said, what did the man do that my buddy killed him? And I said, nothing. And he goes, then what's wrong with my buddy? Why is he hurting him when he did nothing? And we then explained that there are good people and bad people, of every color. And what he did was wrong because he had so much hate in his heart because of this man's skin color. Right. So he now sees that. He knows that this goes on in our world. And it's really sad because he was only 5. But I want him to be aware of this. And I want him to protect all of his friends, no matter what color they are, and to be raised with that mentality of, we don't not like people just because of the way they look.
Right. Well, the funny part about that is 5 seems early, and it's almost, I feel like each generation is like, wait, we have to keep starting earlier and earlier with pretty much everything. And I remember a point when my son was 4. He sat down on the stairs one day and he wanted me to tie his shoes. And very similar to you, like I have these conversations, like I swear my kids came out the womb 38 years old. They were adults from the word go. And he sat down for me to tie his shoes, and very matter-of-factly, he said, Mommy, police are bad. I have no idea where it came from. I said, no, police are not bad. Some people are just not good people, and they happen to be police. Because I don't believe that, I don't tend to like blanket statements. So when you say everyone that is fill on the blank. Now, I have my own issues from a sense of, you may not be a bad human, but you are protecting other bad humans. And so that puts you in a very questionable territory at best.
Absolutely.
But that's a whole nother piece.
Right.
From a general standpoint, and I had friends that were like, why didn't you kind of give him the officer's friendly speech? And I don't know if that's a nationwide, but when I was a kid, officer friendly was kind of their way of giving us an introduction to police officers, and like, oh, they're here to help you, they're kind, and these kinds of things. And I had friends that were like, why didn't you just give him the officer-friendly speech? And I'm like, because that's not how he met me, so I wasn't going to meet him there. And I wanted him to know that because a person is one thing does not mean that they are automatically what someone, has kind of labeled them as. Because if I don't want him to be labeled because of his skin tone, I don't want him to think that about other people, because that's hypocritical. Like, I want him to have critical thinking to go beyond just that one thing, but also to be critical enough in your thinking to understand that certain things do require you to pause and think and possibly behave a little differently, because that is the reality of living in the world in a body that is not white, cisgendered, heteronormative, and most often white male, and in some cases white female. not even a woman, but like a female, you were born this way, because sometimes that's not enough either.
Right. And so how are you raising them now? How old are they now?
They are 7 and 9.
7 and 9. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that they identify as Black.
They do, and they self-identified. It was very important to not do that for them. I felt like they could have mixed, biracial, Black, whichever one they wanted. The only thing that they couldn't have was white, because the world is not gonna acknowledge that. But they self-identify as Black.
And what is their life like? Like, do they feel the effects of what's going on? I mean, they must, obviously, because even my son, who's white, feels it. So, how do you help them and nurture them in this world that we're living in that's just a chaotic mess, it seems?
Part of it is honestly just having to have really open dialogue, because, especially when, with the pandemic and they were home with school, if I am, just like I am right now with you recording this podcast, and if they hear me, then they may hear me talking about white people or Black people or gay people or straight people or trans people, and me having to have conversations of, what that meant. If they heard something like, oh, what did that mean? So part of it is having open enough dialogue to hear me speak about this, being that this is what I do, and kind of being able to have, dialogue around it. Some of it is being able to literally meet them where they are. So at one point last year, my son was seeing some of the protests on TV, and he's like, he said something about it. And I said, well, do you know why they're protesting? And he's like, because they killed that one man. I said, no, because they killed an unarmed Black man. He said, oh. And he kind of stopped, let it sink in, and he said, okay. And he got what he needed from that. Mm-hmm. My son will very openly have conversations about how he feels about certain political figures and why, because my big thing for him is I don't ever want him to just have the blanket statements because he hears it from others. I'm like, do you know why? And let's talk about that. With my daughter, we talk about, her hair texture and why she's beautiful, and that it goes beyond what she looks like. So, years ago, it was like, oh, I'm beautiful because of this. And now if I say, why are you beautiful? She'll say, because I'm smart, because I'm helpful. Because for me, it's really important for them, again, to have that good sense of self, and to know that there's really nothing that's going to be off the table for us to talk about. But the other piece is that, maybe isn't always seen as like, my son, I've had to advocate for him very highly in the school system, because unfortunately he's had teachers that I feel as though have been very limiting of him, and very, they very much want to see him as a stereotype. He's an intelligent, he's a child, but he's an intelligent Black man. And for a lot of people, that's a threat, whether you realize it's a threat to you or not. And you may not even recognize how you're responding to him, but he has always been extremely intelligent. And I would be doing myself and him a huge disservice to not understand the inherent threat that being a Black and intelligent and outspoken Black man in America can present.
Wow. I feel like we raise our children very much the same. My 5-year-old daughter, I tell her the same thing about beauty, and she's very much into makeup. And I go, well, we're beautiful when? She goes, we don't need makeup to be beautiful. I'm like, yes, I know you have to say that now, but it will be ingrained in you. And, we talk about political figures too. I mean, at this point, how can you not, when we just had the election that we did, we have, our first female vice president who's also Black, in the White House. These are monumental things that did not happen when we were growing up.
No.
And I think that also makes it easier for us to talk to them at such young ages about these things, because it's going on right in front of their eyes.
Well, and one of the important things is we also normalize mental health. So, if there's a need to speak to a therapist, I expose my children to things like frequency music and meditation and tapping, to give them ways to also help them to feel as though they can self-soothe, or even just identify in language when they're feeling certain things. One of these small things that I've done as well is, I think it's kind of a very typical parenting thing. You know how something's wrong and we would kind of say, oh, it's okay, or you're okay. I've actually shifted that, and I've started to say you're safe, because I thought about it and I'm like, I don't want to tell you it's okay as if I'm telling you, oh, you don't have to feel that. Oh, you shouldn't feel that. Like, just let it, push it away. I kind of say you're safe, and I will sometimes say, say exactly what it is. You're safe to feel your feelings. You're safe to be upset. You're safe in this moment physically, because I think sometimes when we feel things, part of what comes up is, am I safe to feel this? Can I? Is my body in any type of imminent danger? And so that reminder that as a Black body in this world, that you are safe. For me, it's an act of rebellion to remind my kids of that in moments where they are less than joyful.
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to start using that. I'm going to take that from you. Hope that's okay.
Please do.
How are their friends? Like, have they had any comments made to them? And I don't mean to pry. I'm really curious, because so we did distance learning, of course, for the majority of the year. We went back in April. And so, now we have playmates in real life, and they're of all nationalities and races. And I think it's a wonderful thing, because we talked about potentially moving if we didn't get a proper school transfer that we wanted to the better one within the district. And one of the things that my husband and I said was, like, we don't want to move out of the area to a community where it is not diverse.
Right.
We want them to be exposed to other people, to other walks of life. And we don't just want the suburban white neighborhood where they're going to learn nothing. And then all of a sudden they're going to see a Black person go, what?
Right.
That's not how the world is, and that's not where we want to live. So, are your children embraced by others, or are you still having to work on that mentality with just young people too?
Unfortunately, it's been more of my son. My son has he had a child that actually said to him, "Blacks are better than whites."
That's disgusting.
Well, and he's had another child that has called him the N-word on multiple occasions. So as much as I would, there was a point in my life where I felt like maybe that old generation of racists will die off. Well, they're just kind of grooming the new crop. And unfortunately, I think that there are things that children will overhear, whether that's television, whether it's music, whether it's their family of origin, of neighbors, whatever that might be, and they will pick things up, and they don't always recognize it. In some cases, I think maybe they do recognize it, but there are some cases they just don't know, and maybe they parrot it. But my children have had this conversation. I remember when the little boy said, Blacks are better than whites, which that child did write a note and apologize, and he did actually verbally apologize to my son as well. But I remember that day when I called and talked to him, and I said, I want you to know, well, first, how are you? And, once I kind of talked to him for a second, I said, I want you to know that what that little boy said had nothing to do with you. And for me, it was important for him to know that, like, he doesn't know you well enough to speak on you. And so this is not about you. This is about what you represent to him. However, before I could even get to that point, my then 8-year-old in all his wisdom said, no, mommy, he knew exactly what he said. He said it to me, and he was white. He knew exactly what he said. I was kind of like, well, I can't argue.
You're all, I
with that.
tried, son.
Right. So,
yep, you're probably right, but I tried. And
right. And so
you see how I took the higher road there, kid?
Right. And so it was definitely not because I wanted him to, I never wanted him to think that person didn't have to take responsibility for it or anything like that. But I wanted him to understand that anybody else's viewpoint of you that comes from such a hateful place is not truly about you as a human. However, my son is more than, intelligent and empathetic and aware enough to understand, no, he knew what he said. And what he said was what I was thinking was correct. Right. And what he said was absolutely correct as well. And I was like, well, you're right. You are. And I told him, I said, you are correct. I also want you to know that he doesn't know you. This isn't about you as a human, because when these types of incidents happen, this person is giving you something because of their own insecurities, because of their own feeling of being threatened by what you take from them, what you represent that they feel like they don't have access to. There's any number of reasons why it happens. But very often they don't know you. They don't
Right.
know you. And so for me, it was just one of those moments to where it was like, wait, what is happening? And the challenge then for me became, how do I be a parent in this moment, um, supporting my child through this, and yet feeling like this is what I do professionally, and feeling like this is also a teachable moment for this organization, because this was summer camp, and trying to figure that out as well. And me choosing to prioritize my child, because I also don't want you to realize this is what I do and then feel like, oh crap, this is what happens to the kid or the woman
I said it to the
DEI.
wrong kid. Yeah.
Right. And in that moment, it was like, I'm not going to prioritize teaching you over caring for my child. And it also wasn't lost on me that there were some points, because there were a few interactions around that. There were points where I almost felt like there was this expectation on me to behave as a stereotype. And because I didn't, there was almost this like, wait, you didn't yell, you didn't complain. And I'm like, I don't know what you really thought from me, but no. And this wasn't said to me, but I know what this feels like. I've experienced it enough to know when you are waiting for a certain reaction from me, and when I don't deliver, I actually confuse you more because you don't know what to do. You were waiting to respond to something that I didn't give you as cannon fodder. And you're like, wait, what happened?
If you
were
want to send
confused.
me in to respond that way, I'm happy to do it for you.
Trust me, not because I didn't want to, but because I was like, no, I'm not going to give you that, because my energy needs to go to my child in this moment.
Exactly. And I think it's a shame that people think that they need to be educated. Educate yourself,
Right.
and what kind of education do you really need to know that we're all human beings? It's
Right.
pretty damn simple. It's not complicated. You're a human being. I'm a human being. We deserve the same happiness, the same rights, the same everything in life, no matter what.
The challenge comes in when we look at the ways that we've complicated life because of the simple fact that obviously, we think now about our fight or flight responses, for example, and our, fight or flight can be triggered by anxiety when it really, back in the day was like, is this tiger chasing me? Do I need to run? And because so much of our lives has evolved and grown in ways that we all love, but yet it has complicated things. And so now it becomes like, wait, so you mean I have to apply for this job, and I have to hope that they're going to read my name on this application and still give me an opportunity to come in. And that when I sit down, the person that I'm going to sit in front of didn't go to school with somebody that looked like me, that they felt like stole something from them. And then they won't give that to me. And then how is that going to affect me being able to get this house that I want, that is in a red line area that doesn't want people that look like me? And then it's going to impact the school that my child can now go to, the quality of their education. And will that possibly position them for the school to prison pipeline?
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge is that it's gotten so interwoven into all of these additional pieces versus I live in a cave, I eat from this tree, I run from the animals. It's not that simple anymore. And so
give me an island and I'm there.
Right. And so all these other pieces, it's the understanding of how they all go together. And it really does go into areas that, again, if you had easy access to quality education, you don't consider the absence of that because that's your norm.
Right.
And so we have to have this place of understanding that not being labeled because of your gender, your race, your parents, because we had a recent podcast episode of my podcast, Pause on the Play, with Steve Disselhorst, and he talked about being a gay dad and how that impacted his adopted children. So now we have layers of things. And if this isn't something that you have to deal with, you don't consider those pieces. But all of these extra pieces that have gone beyond the whole life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it's hard, especially when as a Black body, can I just live first? And that's what I hope for my kids. Like, I hope that you can get to, pursuit of happiness, but I need you to have life right now.
I want to say I'm sorry that your son has had to deal with this. It's utter bullshit. And, children should be able to live innocently and happily and freely. And it saddens me to a new level that, he would experience this. And at such a young age, to experience it in your lifetime shouldn't happen. But then to have this happen, to have a kid say this to you when you are so young, it really makes me sad.
I mean, well, first, thank you. And I wish that, this didn't happen to him. And yet at the same time, I'm grateful that it happened to a child that has two parents that will support him through that, with a mother that has context into this work and can navigate some of those conversations, that, has had her own challenges of what do I want mental health and self-sustainability to look like for me, and how do I give that to my children differently than how it was given or not given to me as a child. And so, the beauty in that, really terrible situation is that he has a support system that does provide him an outlet to be able to navigate situations like that. And that understanding that this will sadly not be the only time that you will go through this. So what can I give you to best prepare you for the life that you're going to live? I mean, I remember, I think he was maybe 3 and we were in Panera Bread, and the person behind us, when they were asked what they wanted, the person being served was like, I want people to date their own race. So, I mean, this was not isolated incidents like these. And this was in downtown Baltimore, which is by no means this like, interracial couples are this strange sight. And so these things are very commonplace, but this is where, sometimes we'll, over in Pause on the Playland, we'll talk about like, this is just Tuesday. These are regular occurrences. And so when they become normalized, it stinks that they're normalized, but it also means that I have learned how to kind of navigate them in a way that doesn't all of a sudden feel like, oh my gosh, it's like, yeah, this is shitty.
Yeah.
But this isn't the first time, and it probably won't be the last.
I don't know if this video has hit the East Coast yet, but in Sacramento over the weekend, there was a lesbian couple kissing in a pool at a hotel, and there were a bunch of other people, and this white woman just shames them. She's like, what's wrong with you? You're disgusting. I have children. You're embarrassing me. And then she lets out the profanity. And they're like, wait, we discussed you and you're embarrassed for your children, but you've dropped the F-bomb. You've dropped quite a bit of other things. She's on video. Turns out she's from Oakland. So thanks for being a part of the Bay Area. Go back to New Jersey, where apparently you're from. But this was the norm. And, I think one of the great parts is that we have social media, and now she can be shamed for what she said, because I think she should be. I think it's disgusting. I hope that, she learns her lesson from it. And, who knows what can happen when you really feel freely to say that, not just to another human being, but also in front of a bunch of other people.
Right.
I don't get it, because that's not me. That's not something I would ever do, say, or think. No. So I can't grasp why you think that's okay.
No.
I don't understand some people. And yeah,
no,
I don't get any of it, but that's what's going on over here on the left coast.
Good grief. People.
It's everywhere. And
sadly it is. And the unfortunate truth is that there, now a lot of the, the ways that I do my work, I do it shame and blame free. However, Karens, you will get the business. I'm sorry. And I'm not sorry, because if you show up doing that type of thing, you get what you get in response, because you have done something that you wanted to shame others because you thought that you had this moral high ground. And then when it comes back, you're like, oh, I can't believe you're doing this to me. Why not?
Right.
What is it about you that you think that you are immune from being held accountable? And that just goes into the fact of how people talk about cancel culture, and I'm like, I don't think that it's really about canceling you. I think it's that you didn't like being held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, let's not
But
conflate
if you believe that
this.
way, I'm okay with canceling you.
Hey, sometimes, certain shows don't get renewed. It is what it is sometimes.
Oh, you are such a pleasure to talk to.
Oh, thank you.
And I really want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing all of this about your children and what your son has gone through. To hear your honesty and the experiences you guys have been through. I greatly appreciate you sharing that with me and everybody listening.
Of course. I will say that I've shared these things, but I want everyone to also hear that my son and my daughter, they're two intelligent, funny, empathetic human beings. They have family that loves them fiercely. They are protected. They are cared for. They are nurtured. And they know that they have space to grow, to feel their feelings, to, express themselves. And they know that who they are is a gift, and they are constantly reminded of that. And so as much as everything that I said that he had gone through is by no means acceptable, I want you to know that they are given, as much as we possibly can, a bubble of knowing that they are heralded as amazing individuals.
And they have new friends in California too.
See, look at that. All over the place.
Yes. From coast to coast, sea to shining sea.
No.
Can you take a moment and share with everyone where they can find you and listen to you and learn more about what you do?
I can. Again, my name is Erica Courdae. You can learn more about me and the services that I provide, including my workshops and one-on-one work at ericacourdae.com. You can learn more about me and my business partner, India Jackson, who together make up Pause on the Play, which we have a podcast, which you can find on Apple and Spotify, Pause on the Play. You can also come over to the website, pauseontheplay.com, to learn more about the podcast. Check out our show notes, which we have been going through and probably will continue to go through a constant evolution of making sure that our show notes are accessible to not only those that are listening, but those that are reading and taking in the information as well. So please feel free to come over and read the articles that we create from the show notes as well, for those that maybe are not listening or this isn't your favorite way of taking in content. You can learn about our 2-to-1 work there, as well as our implicit to explicit work, which helps you with your values. And if you just want to come over to Instagram at Erica Courdae or at Pause on the Play, you can learn more about us. And you can also learn more about Pause on the Play, the community where we have exactly these types of conversations, because it's not just about business, it's human as well. So you can join in with other leaders and business owners and individuals that are seeking a place to be supported and to be better.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I love nothing more than a person who stands up for what is right. And I love that Erica has always stood up for the rights of others and continues to do so. We need to emphasize equal rights now more than ever. We need to teach our children to do better and be better. It absolutely crushed me to hear about what has been said to Erica's son. I don't want that for any child. And as adults, it's up to us to ensure that it doesn't. We need to stop these cycles. We need to work harder towards making a more inclusive society where it doesn't matter if you're Black, white, brown, or biracial. You're a human being, and that is what matters. Let's continue to have these discussions and work towards making a better future for our children. Until next week, my friends, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy.